It's good to be back. Did you miss me? So we're going to talk a little bit about the concept that we're incubating at the EBU. By the way, EBU stands for European Broadcasting Union. While it is called European, we do have a member in Australia, in Japan, and in Canada. So go figure. The concept that we're incubating, we see it as a next step in the evolution of what we've been doing for almost 10 years now with transition to IP. The point is the IP transition was never the end goal, right? It was a stepping stone, it was an enabler. It's what you do with it that matters, and how you design your, not just your facilities, but also the products that use IP and use what is enabled by the IP technologies. So surprisingly, we will give you a history lesson. So if you want to leave, you can leave now, but there will be a bit of history. We'll be brief about it. Unsurprisingly, or it's either the other way around, we're going to talk about pets and we're going to talk about cattle. And I promise you that, and cattle with bow ties, and by the middle of this presentation, this picture will make sense. I promise. So bear with me for now. And we're going to talk about the containers, but not cattle in the containers. Containers as a no, I should stop. So I will let Willem continue here, and I will reboot my mind.
All right, I'll try to continue. Well, thank you for the introduction, Ievgen. So let's see. Oh, it actually works. So small look back into history. So what happened? Actually, in 2015, that's already a while ago, there was one major stepping stone that happened. That's the JTNM task force came together and they created the JTNM reference architecture. I'm not going through the full history line here. There are a few key points that might be of interest to you. So JTNM roadmap of network media open interoperability, that was the thing that happened in 2016. Now, 2017, 2110 was published. That's an interesting point in time that we say, yay, we're there. Suddenly we move into the IT industry. Yep, that might be true, but that's maybe not entirely true. Let's get back to this. But why was EBU interested in this? And a lot of people, well, I don't know if you're aware, but a lot of those broadcasters were building their facility in the early 60s. And those buildings have worn off and they need to refurbish or build from new. And then they were thinking, well, what should we build with? Will it be 2110 or IP or will it be SDI? Well, back in those days, even before 2110 was published, it's like CBC and BBC, they already thought, let's go to IP. If we now think about going to SDI, we might be the last in history that will have SDI in the facility. So you see a few new builders there already. Now, 2 years later, we thought about, okay, we have these new builders they're building, we have 2110 up and running, we have interface specifications for the control plane, but now what about the maturity of all those solutions? So we created something like JTNM Tested, and we did a lot of them. It's a lot of work, but those catalogs, they are still available. They give you a test plan to test security, the data plane, and the control plane. So all good. So if we move further in time, let's say 2021, well, COVID kicked in. And we thought, well, let's do another maturity test. But that was quite a difficult thing to do when you cannot go physically into a room with people together to do it. Nevertheless, a few documents got updated and that sort of things. Now, moving further into time, we were thinking, well, we're on 2110, we have all these things available, but are we there yet? Do we get all the benefits of moving into the IT world? Well, that's probably a question that I will leave over to Ievgen. Are we there yet? Yes, we're running switches in our facility, but are we really truly IT? Ievgen, what do you think about this? Please come.
Saying we are IT is a loaded statement, right? So we see we've spent a lot of time actually working on the IP standards, right? And around the show, a lot of companies will sell you ST2110 solutions, which is great. But kind of fail to understand and fail to see as big of a push to move forward, right? So what's next? We've adopted IT technologies to a certain point, right? Some are better than others. And when media companies say, okay, we're IT now, I don't really think they understand what that means, because in the meantime, if we go back into another history lesson, I apologize for that, how did the IT evolve? So we started with the monolithic mainframes, right? So big, huge computers size of this booth that were doing some calculations, right? At some point, as the Moore's law progressed and as the CPUs and GPUs progressed, we outgrew the hardware, and we started to think, okay, we can run more stuff on our hardware. And so the virtualization kicked in, right? So we started deploying hypervisors, we started doing VMs. And then at some point, everyone took a picture. I'm about to go to the next one. Yeah? Okay, good. Containers, right? So we started to look at optimizing the virtualization and not virtualizing the underlying hardware, but rather reusing the core parts of the operating system. And this is where we also started to change the patterns of how we design software, how we design the workflows, right? So there, it is completely different running software on the virtual machine than in a container. Or is it? Or should it be? Well, in my opinion, it should, but we'll touch on that a bit later. All that started to give us opportunities, right? So we started looking at cloud native technologies, right? So we can suddenly do a lot of stuff in the shared facilities, right? And we can suddenly rent someone else's computer, and we called it a cloud. And all that was available because all this process, essentially what we've been doing, that process that we've been putting disaggregation higher and higher in the layers, right? So first we disaggregated hardware from the operating systems when we moved away from the mainframes. Then we suddenly disaggregated hardware from virtual hardware, and we started doing virtual machines. And then we disaggregated software from the operating systems, and we started doing containers. And that is only possible with things like white box servers, white box switching, right? So we do not have anymore the dependency of, okay, I have a Dell server, I must run Dell operating system on it, right? Or I have an HP server and I have to run the HP operating system stack. No, actually, I don't care anymore, because my container can run can run on Raspberry Pi, it can run on my laptop, it can run on my server, or it can run on someone else's computer in the cloud. And all this was made possible by introducing scale, right? So the clouds, as we know, we call them hyperscalers, right? Because when we go into the cloud, there are thousands of servers, and often we don't think about it, about how they run their data centers, right? And managing all this on a contrary to how we do it in the media was only possible with the adoption of the certain principle. And in the IT world, it's called pets versus cattle. Anyone familiar with this principle? Okay, you heard this presentation, right? Okay, yeah. Anyone has pets at home? Yeah. So I have two Sphinx cats, and I have a snake, and my wife is absolutely obsessed with our pets. It's a corn snake. It's a tiny. It's pink. It's literally pink colored. Okay, it's not that Sphinx. We'll talk afterwards. My wife absolutely adores them. Right, so they've been with us for many years, and if anything happens to them, we will spend any amount of money to bring them back to health, right? So they have special diets because one of them has kidney issues, so she eats special special food. And this is how we often treat our devices, right? So if we apply it to the IT principle, this is my server that runs my core database and a domain controller. And if something happens to that server, I will make sure that I grab my keyboard as fast as I can and I run into the server room and I will start troubleshooting that server, because if that thing goes down, I'm in trouble, right? On the other hand, and apply this thinking also to media and reflect how you treat devices in your server rooms, which we will touch on in a minute. On the other hand, let's think about the farm, right? As gruesome as it is, when we talk about cows on a farm, if something happens to one cow, it doesn't have a name, it has a number, and I will just send it to a butcher. I'm sorry, but that's true. Most cases, I'm not going to spend as much effort trying to recover that cow. I will move on with my operation. And that is what happens in the major hyperscaler data centers. If my switch fails and I have thousands of racks, I will not bother running around with the console cable. I will rip that thing out of the rack as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. I will put another one in and hope that my automation kicks in and deploys the configuration on that switch. Same goes for the servers. Nobody, in most data centers, people are explicitly disallowed to troubleshoot networking equipment with console cables, because that makes that switch a special snowflake switch. And when the next round of automation kicks in, that custom configuration or troubleshooting workaround that you've deployed on that server will be overwritten, and you will be back in trouble. So you're going to keep some spares, and if something happens, you rip it out, you put another one in. So in the IT world, we are no longer nurturing those individual pets. Hopefully now this makes sense, right? We are operating a herd, and I was told that, by the way, herd is not applicable to the sheep, but that's the intricacies of English language. Our British colleagues were very offended. We operate that herd on a principle of like, everyone is equal, and if something happens, well, tough life. All that enabled us to increase the fundamental capacities of our clouds. And at some point, it became very attractive to run media applications on it. And we thought, okay, we moved our e-commerce and our file-based workflows and our playout into the cloud. Let's do live production. Sure. Okay, great. There was a perfect storm. At the time, the COVID kicked in, and suddenly we all went through a digital transformation, right? You know, this famous LinkedIn joke, like, who was your digital transformation advocate in the organization? Was it a CTO, a CFO, or was it COVID? A lot of companies suddenly became cloud enabled, right? So there was a lot of cloud offerings popping in here and there. And we got addicted to it. We got addicted to what we call replacing CapEx with OpEx, right? So suddenly it was swipe the credit card, deploy another instance. Everything is cool. And then the reality kicked in, right? And then we got our AWS bills. And suddenly we realized that running a vision mixer that is supposed to be up and running 24/7 on G5 to XL GPU-based instance in Amazon that is billed by a minute may not be a very cost-effective thing to do. And some things are better off just sit there and work over the clock. There was also a lot of business requirements in that. And to give you that perspective and also to make sense of what I just said, because I see a lot of confused people here in the audience. Willem, can you tell us how does that apply to media?
Well, meanwhile, for most broadcasters, the budget doesn't grow, right? And even the budget shifted into the media delivery, because now we're all digital and we're using the internet to get to our public. But producing or transmitting everything via the internet, it's more expensive than using a transmitter, right? You need to pay even per stream that you bring to the audience. But for us, we're talking about media production. So you see already money being shifted into other parts of the whole chain. So how can we survive? We probably need to be more efficient about media production as well. And if we look at media production, well, what are the things that we need to take care about? Well, maybe this. This is the current data center of, I could say, an SDI plant. But if you look at the current 2110 plant, it looks just the same. It are the same boxes with another connector at the back. Now, as a result, you know, back in the days with SDI, there's probably an engineer that does the orange boxes. There's another engineer that does the boxes with all the panels. And this is spending a lot of money, maybe where we don't need to spend the money. This doesn't bring any value to your media facility, right? So how should it, or how could it look any better? Maybe something like this. Maybe it should be as simple as putting another server in the rack and off you go. We don't care about the panel on the front. It shouldn't read the brand or it shouldn't have the flashing knobs. I know it looks sexy, but it doesn't add any value to the person sitting at home watching your content.